Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast, and it's my pleasure today to be joined by Bobby Banerjee. Bobby, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, likewise. Great to be on.
For those of you who haven't met you or don't know you, where have they been? But for those who don't, could you give yourself a little bit of an introduction? Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I started off as a recruiter myself just over 10 years ago, working for S3 in Birmingham. So I had the trials and tribulations of being a brand new consultant in the world of tech recruitment. 2.5 successful years. My first year was an absolute nightmare. Tore most of my hair out. I think I did 2 deals in my first year. And so most places probably wouldn't hire me now. But over the last 7 or 8 years, I've been helping young recruiters essentially try and outperform the market by doing a lot of training and coaching with them that looks at the humanist areas of recruitment, because actually we forget that we're working with humans, and it's how would we react to certain things, and using empathy-based learning, I guess, if you want to give it a fancy title, to be able to kind of get success from people.
Putting the consultant back in consultant, right?
That's the plan. It's trying to get people to think about things from that particular viewpoint, and just remember that they were a candidate looking for a job at one point, and they've been people with buying power. So how do you use that self knowledge to then kind of impart what you do on others?
I think it's one of those things that a lot of recruiters are now kind of paying more attention to, right? I always made this joke around, recruitment consultants didn't really do much consulting. That was, that consulting part was kind of left out. Now I know that's become more and more important, because as this kind of fight over good candidates, you want to kind of be able to build those relationships and take people on that journey with you, and not necessarily just sell the role, but sell everything that goes around with kind of being just an empathetic recruiter, which we don't have the best reputations of in this space, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, what I love about the industry is that you can be absolutely anyone and make a success of yourself. It doesn't matter about your socioeconomic background. It doesn't matter about creed, color, race, gender. You can make yourself a success in recruitment. The other problem is that absolutely anyone can join. So it doesn't matter what your behavioral issues are, that you can make a success by having some really poor attitudes, and therefore people remember those things.
Yeah.
I mean, dare I start using it as a marketing tool, but it's those things around what has happened in our industry over certain, however many years. I can't remember what the stat is. It's that we're 5 times more likely to rant about something than we are to rave about something.
Something like that.
So along those lines. And so we then therefore are more likely to take to Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google. And if you ever do a search around why recruiters are and let it autofill, you should see some of the results.
That sounds dangerous, to be honest. And probably slightly depressing as well. But today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to tune into that a little bit, right? Because I thought what would be a good idea is if we talk to some of the businesses out there that probably you kind of the types of business you work with, the types of business that Thinking Circles work with, who are either just starting up, who have just started up, maybe a year or so old, and some of the things that between us we think are important that sometimes can get dropped off the radar because you're incredibly busy, your time and resource short, but actually things that in the long term to medium term can really kind of play out to make you a better business, right, and more successful business. So I think that's a great place to kind of start. And you kick us off, right? What are kind of some of the things just off the top what you think we should be considering?
Well, like I say, so I started up myself a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of things that you can think about whilst, I guess, being in the business and being working on the business at the same time. So I guess I'd want to split it up in the exact same way, because even as a trainer, I found myself working in the business a lot rather than on. And therefore my strategy, my plan of action, my go-to market kind of kind of playbook had gone out the window at various points. So I guess from the first port of call is have a plan
Yeah.
and have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan, and be able to hold yourself and help and get someone else to help you be accountable to it. Whether it's a coach, whether it's someone that you trust, whether it's someone that you value as a mentor figure, whatever that looks like, have a plan that someone else can be accountable to.
Yeah.
But then I guess we've got to talk about the stuff that's in the business as well. So what generally tends to happen is people rely on their old networks. People are either out on restrictive covenants. So you're building something from either scratch or on a knowledge base that is a little bit lower than you'd like to be. And so what people seem to forget in the world of recruitment, that actually your first 6 months, whether it's as a business owner or as a rookie recruiter, is essentially one massive marketing exercise. And that's not me saying that just because I'm on a marketing rules podcast. But if you think about what you're doing at the moment, what you're trying to do is get your name out in the marketplace. And whether that is as a good recruiter, whether it's as a good person, whether it is as a knowledgeable person in your marketplace, all you're doing at the moment is trying to get those things. And you know what? Jobs will come in as a byproduct of doing that really well. So it's about your outreach. So it's about the LinkedIn outreach. It's about I guess the emails, the how do we build up a great database of people that are really bought into us. And I wish I could say that's all sales, but unfortunately, James, I guess that's all marketing, because you're A/B testing on the messaging that you put out to people, because you're checking out different types of emails to see whether they fit. You're actually looking at things hopefully from an empathetic perspective, and realizing actually what would make me respond to those messages, whether
Yeah.
I was a candidate or a client. And so if I take the candidate side to start off with, because every good business starts with having some great candidates to speak to, because again, it's not like you can, just like most businesses, without a product offering, what can you do? So if you are going to engage with people, the first thing that you want to think about is, in this particular market, what is going to make people want to move? What is going to make people want to move away from the relative safety of their current job, where they're safe, they're settled, they've got training, they've got coaching, they've got everything that they need, and a progression plan, to be able to go to the relative uncertainty of a new job where they could be last in, first out, or you see is it LIFO, the acronym? You have those particular things. You don't have all the same benefits. You potentially don't have all those increased circumstances. And so you've got to think about what is going to make someone going to move from that situation. And once you understand that, the outreach can become a lot easier to deal with. I mean, from your perspective, what are you seeing kind of people do or not do that could be really easy fixes?
So I'm going to kind of pick up some of the kind of points that you made as well. So with a plan, right? The amount of businesses who don't do that, right? That we see who kind of start off their business, and you know what? It's more of a thought exercise doing a business plan than it is anything else. You don't have to even stick to it, right? Most businesses don't stick to it. It's about actually putting something pen to paper and doing that. So anyone who's listening who's maybe a recruiter or just about to start their own business, or has even done it over the last kind of couple of years and hasn't written a plan, it's still always worth doing, because it's a kind of philosophical exercise, so you can kind of put your brain into a slightly different space and take it out of working in the business to working on the business, which is the great point that you kind of made. So do it, and even if you don't ever look at it again, it's just an exercise to go through. The other things that we're kind of, I guess, that we're seeing is just kind of just bad communication from agencies, right? And that's always the kind of thing that is, it kind of seems to be a bit, not necessarily ubiquitous. It's nowhere near as bad as it was, right? But and when I talk about bad communication, it's just that constitutes of no communication, right? As well,
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that, and we have every kind of tool at our disposal in this day and age within the recruitment space to communicate with people, whether it is podcasts, whether it is YouTube, whether it's live streaming, whether it's WhatsApp groups, whether it's other communities, whether it's Slack if you're in the IT space, whether it's Discord, whether it's Red. There's all these places where you can
I mean, you
communicate
even
with.
forgot TikTok and Instagram.
Well, it's so last year, but there are all these places, right, where you can have a touch point, right, and I speak a lot about this when it comes to kind of building your brand. Every place you've got a touch point is a touch point with your brand, right, and everyone who has any interaction with it is kind of has that interaction with your brand, has the potential of being what we all want them to be, either referrers, advocates, and in the recruitment space, go potentially become a client and potentially become a candidate as well. So there's all of
Yeah,
that,
totally.
but people just not getting that, thinking that's such a big job to do, and actually it's better to ghost people and worry about those consequences as opposed to actually try and keep in contact with people.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that we've all ghosted people before. It's not, it's okay to have done it. It's what you've learned from the experience and why and almost kind of doing a bit of a post-mortem on it, thinking why you did it. And and from the research that I do, because I speak to lots of recruiters, I guess I've trained over 1,200, maybe 1,300 now.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we try to avoid an uncomfortable conversation or something that we think is going to be more uncomfortable than it invariably turns out to be. And so we've got to frame it and in a way that maybe isn't uncomfortable. Maybe if that person hasn't got the job, that's okay. It's okay that people don't get jobs. You are going to be placing less than 10 to 15% of all people that you put forward to interview. And that's not a stat that's kind of come up with. You just look at it from a general perspective. If you're working 2 or 3 jobs, you're probably sending 7 or 8 candidates to interview, of which maybe 1, maybe 2 get a job. That's just the cold hard fact of the world of recruitment. So what happens to all those conversations that you've had with people that have already gone through this amazing process with you and then didn't get the job? What we generally tend to do is leave them out in the cold, or just give them, oh, I didn't, you weren't quite right for us. Whereas actually, that person can therefore be a really good advocate of your service, because what we generally tend to do, and you'll tell me about, I'm sure you're a better exponent of net promoter scores and this, that, and the other than I am. But a net promoter score is usually done on satisfaction from usually people who have gone through the service. But it's actually looking at those people that haven't had the full service and have still had an amazing experience. They're the ones that become your biggest advocates in the marketplace. So how are you going to speak to all those people that maybe you didn't place and go, well, actually, I'm really sorry that we weren't able to place you. And in all honesty, the feedback that I've got from the client isn't enough to help you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find you other opportunities based on the fact that you were really good for this company. You're bound to be great for another couple of companies.
So the usual response that kind of comes from that is, because we've got so many people applying, we've got so much coming in that we just can't handle it all, which isn't an excuse these days, right? Because there's ways of automating that kind of response.
Well,
So
I mean, I stopped recruiting, well, in earnest on a desk 5 years ago, and even then there was all the technology at your disposal to be able to, even if it was off a job board, you can green, amber, and red people based on the job board that you used, and send messages out to those people who were all in red, and you can easily base it based on whether they, I guess there were people who didn't have the right to work in the UK, who didn't have the right skill set, and you can actually just nitpick and send little emails, just say, look, on this occasion you weren't quite right because we are looking for a UK citizen, but I'd love to keep in touch.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that would come back to me and just say, oh my God, this is the first email that I've had of this in months. And that makes you just think, oh my God, is common courtesy and common sense just two of the things that are missing from our day-to-day job, because we're just so in the moment that we forget to apply little things that maybe that took an extra 3-4 minutes out of my day, but it can have a lasting impact on your brand.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing as well, isn't it? Because without getting kind of too het up in how branding works, but all those little outreaches affects your personal brand and the larger brand of the business that you're either cultivating or that you work for, right? And all of it can have a positive, negative, or passive effect, right? And that's what you want to get over. And to come to your point about net promoter score, if anybody's kind of listening and not heard of NPS, it's worth it's a very simple kind of formula for understanding if someone is a kind of an advocate of your business. Basically, you'll all have received and you'll all have tried to score someone or something, a product or services from one
Yeah,
to
on
ten.
a
You know,
1
and
to
that's that
10,
way
how likely are you to
to refer
buy
us to
this
a friend
product,
or colleague.
service?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And that
all
and that
that
and
kind of
that can
stuff.
be adapted in the recruitment space, and is being to be used within the recruitment space. And I think probably to kind of, I think once you go down that route, you then suddenly think, well, NPS has its kind of limitations. You start kind of branching out to other those kind of advocacy scores, but it's a good place to start to understand, and it's very simple. It's quick and easy to roll out, right?
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, what I noticed when we started the process off at S3, the issues that you usually face are people don't realize what a good score is.
Yeah.
People have a limit on what they're going to give. It's a bit like the old football analogy of people could score a hat trick, but in the newspapers they'll still only be given an 8 out of 10 because that's the most that they'll ever give.
Yeah.
And so those little dynamics that you have to navigate, and people don't really realize that it's actually only a 9 or 10 out of 10 that is
Yeah.
seen as a true positive.
Yeah.
Because a 7 or 8 or a 6, 7 or 8 that
No,
is
it's nine. Yeah, you can you can Google it, but it's 9 and 10 are the kind of advocates,
yeah,
and then basically you either get the passives and then you get the kind of negatives ones at the bottom, and
exactly
you
passive.
minus either the scores together, you minus and multiply the scores, and
Yeah,
that's what gives you.
the point that I was going to come on to was the fact that if you scored 70 or 80% in any other walk of life, that would be deemed as excellent. And so that's why people potentially give those particular
Yeah,
scores out, because they think that is excellence in university. If you get 70, that's a first class degree. So obviously we then need to educate people what that service needs to look like to be a 9 or 10 to these people to then be able to give those scores out, which therefore brings us back nicely onto the service and what is the service that you are offering. What we're not very good at with our candidates and our clients is showcasing the life cycle from start to finish. They don't actually know the work that gets done by recruiters to be able to find people their role or be able to find candidates for a company, because people don't realize that yes, there's a lot of technology being used, but there is a Boolean search, and we do look at how many keywords come up on a Boolean search, but we're also there working with candidates who invariably, because we're not very good as British people of selling ourselves, we don't write very good CVs, or we miss things off, or we try and write 15 years worth of experience in a paragraph, or conversely 6 months in 3 pages. And so unfortunately I wouldn't say anything in between, because doesn't seem to be that it seems to be very polar in how people do things. And so if we're having to have conversations to get this information out of people to understand what skill sets they've had that they might not have necessarily talked about.
it's it's
And
it's
so,
it's, it's a crazy thing, right? That we're still there, right? After all this time, right? We have these conversations around kind of the CV being dead or not, and we're still having trouble actually writing them. You know what I mean? It's kind of, we haven't actually cracked the first bit. Um, but from your perspective of the businesses that you kind
yeah,
of you work with, right? You know, for the ones who are kind of in their earlier stages, let's say, because I know you kind of coach kind of people coming into the space, or people who are new into space, or
hmm
new in, you know what does that kind of, if you're kind of coaching someone in what does that look like? Say, if you say, look, first 6 months, these are the things you need to kind of concentrate on. You know what I mean? How does
yeah,
that look?
it looks. To be honest, it looks really bespoke. So we look at so when I work with a newish business, we look at it and go, like I say, what's the plan first and foremost? Understand what the plan is and how we can then help create stuff around the plan. And it can fall into a number of different things, and it's looking as if a lot of people end up getting, again, that stereotype of the fact that people think that they need to do absolutely everything in the business when they first start one. So, they need to be, they need to be the salesperson, they need to be the office manager, they need to be the painter and decorator, they need to be the marketing
Yeah.
specialist, and then we get all this tech to try and help us on our way. But the problem is, what we've got up there isn't quite ready to use the tech. Like I could try and create a marketing platform using Canva. Am I going to? No, because I'm not a marketer and I don't know enough about it. And so it's working with. So what I end up doing is work with companies to look at what can be taken by them, what's in their strengths. It's almost like doing a bit of a SWOT analysis with people and going,
Right.
where do you see your strengths and weaknesses, and what can be done with those weaknesses, and what can we do to keep building on those strengths? Because if you're a BD person but doesn't like candidate acquisition, there's stuff for that. You know,
Yeah.
you can outsource a lot of that. If, like me, you're not very good at marketing, there are so many really good things that you can do. Whether it's using someone like yourselves, or there's freelancers via Fiverr and Upwork, or whatever you do. Just have a think about, if I was charging myself out, what hourly charge would I be looking for, and would I be doing the task that I'm doing for that money?
Yeah, it's a great point, right? I talk about this a lot as well in some of the kind of presentations. As startups, which hat are you wearing today, right? Is it your admin hat, your accountancy hat, your marketing hat? And you can't wear them all because you just look stupid, right? So you can only really wear one or two hats at any one time,
Hmm.
and even then, you still look a bit stupid from a man who's wearing a hat right now. You know what I mean? It is. You've got to kind of concentrate on what pull to your strengths. The obvious thing is, like, no one, when you're starting a business, you don't do your own accounts, right? You're
Hmm.
crazy if you want to do that because you're not an accountant. That's not what you do. So the fact that, as you kind of eloquently put it, you need to kind of outsource basically what you don't want to do. And as recruitment has become more and more complex, probably for the better to a certain extent, you need to be able to kind of move out, or take those hats and give them to someone else to do on your behalf, basically. Whether that is the marketing,
Yeah.
whether it is the kind of whatever else, probably not going to do your own IT, that kind of stuff, right? All that kind of stuff. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, obvious.
There are some really good places to go. There are some great growth partners out there. I've been working with a growth partner myself, in that what they do for me is get rid of, kind of find the right CRM, because, oh my God, how many hours can that take for someone, especially in recruitment? And it's because recruitment CRMs, there's hundreds of them, and all of them do ever so slightly different things. And it's looking at those particular aspects. For me, you're 100% right. It was accounting. I'm not. I'd like to think I'm quite good at maths, but accounting, not a chance. So why not get either some technology or the help of someone that can do that? And luckily, my kind of growth partner helps me with that, because he then takes all of that stuff, found some tech. I've now just got an app where I just have to put all my receipts down. He's going to have a go at me because I still have those receipts to do. Um, but it just makes your life so much easier, because then it means I can get into training, coaching, consulting.
But I think the thing that holds some businesses back and recruiters back at this point is because they're thinking, well, it will cost money, right? Well, that's that you can't really start new businesses on a shoestring, right? You need some kind of backing. You can do it for on a shoestring, but you're probably, then that's your mindset moving forward, right? Is
Hmm.
you're going to be fairly tight with a business. Whereas actually, I mean, one of the things I've learned is, spend money where you need to spend money, right? That is kind of that's kind of my ethos with my business. And what we try and kind of expect from our clients is, you need to spend money to I'm not going to say to make money, because that's crass, but there are certain areas where you need to kind of have a budget for, because it's going to make your life a damn sight easier. If you try and do it on a shoestring, then it kind of just all falls a bit flat.
I think what we generally tend to fall in the trap of is cost versus value.
Exactly.
And I've had to learn that the hard way, because so for example, for a CRM, I just tried to use Excel for the first year. Yeah, exactly. What a stupid move that was, especially when there are such amazing free CRMs out there for fledgling businesses. So then realized, hang on, that helps. And then, and that was because I was just too busy thinking about the cost, because I had a business partner at the time and I just thought cost, 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 because I wanted to make sure that the bottom line was as profitable as it could be. But then I realized the amount of time that I've spent sequencing, creating mass emails that make sense to people. Really fortunate that the person that I've hired has now started off a brand new kind of email campaign where we can drip feed bits and pieces of exciting news each week, or business development tips. And it's like, all these weird and wonderful things that can then hopefully build business of the medium to longer term. Sure, you look at your short term and go, right, where am I? Where's my next deal? Where's my next meal coming from? But that comes from, but you've got to have a look at your short term goals as well as your medium to long term goals, and don't just stray off the medium to long term, because, but I'll be honest, one of my medium to long term goals was to be part of a networking group, and that's how we met.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for me, that was a really big thing, because, in most networking groups, you have to pay some money, which is absolutely fine. But it's the knowledge, it's the expertise, I hate using the word exposure, but it is great to have access to lots of different people. And and so it's how do you view your short to medium term goals and the money that you spend to make those things happen?
Yeah. Bobby, there's some absolutely great tips. Hopefully, if you've been listening to this, there's enough to kind of take away if you are kind of starting your own business. Bobby, as always, we are going to include all of your details in the show notes. If anybody wants to know about you or your business, they can kind of reach out. But for now, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
No worries. Look forward to another one soon.